The gacha mechanic in Nikke has an interesting system, and with it, you can actually learn how to progress more efficiently if you manage it right, and get your most desired units when you want them the most. That and the 160 wall being possibly one of the most infamous progression barriers in the game, you want to know how you can get 5 max limit broken SSRs to break through the wall and keep progressing. So how do you maximize the gacha to help plan ahead for any desired units, and also use it to break through the 160 wall faster? In this volume on my detailed series of guides called Cummander Bootcamp, I'm going to be explaining how to handle the gacha mechanics and also manage your pulls to break through the wall fast. My name is Psyche, and let's get started. So in this guide, I'm sort of knocking out 2 birds with 1 stone. Because the gacha and the 160 wall are kind of interchangeable, I'm going to be explaining both in the same guide. Now, this video is time-stamped, so feel free to skip ahead to some parts if you're only looking for that. The gacha system in Nikke, despite what you may think, is actually pretty generous. SSR units drop with a rate of 4%, meaning that you will average 1 every 25 pulls, though sometimes that does not reflect real life. Every time you pull, you'll get a mileage ticket, gold ticket for the limited banner, and the normal ones for the standard banner. The drawback of Nikke's gacha is that any non-SSR unit is pretty much useless except for contributing to the mileage tickets and body labels. Unlike some other gacha games where getting a 4-star item is at least useful in some way. There are 2 primary types of banners, the limited and the standard banner. Let's start with the standard. All SSRs in the standard pool in this banner have an equal chance of appearing, with the exception of those in the Pilgrim faction, who get a slightly higher drop chance. New units are constantly being added to the standard pool, so to help with getting units that you want, there is a wishlist mechanic that allows you to select 5 Nikkes from 3 different factions for a total of 15. If you get a Nikke from one of those factions, they are guaranteed to be one of the 5 that you chose. You cannot select pilgrims, but again, all pilgrims have a slightly higher chance of dropping. I would suggest filling out the wish list right away, and I believe there are 3 reasons to select certain Nikkes on here. The most obvious is just putting characters that you like. This is a waifu collecting simulator, so just pick whoever you want. The other 2 reasons to wishlist certain Nikkes are for meta units, or units that you are close to max limit breaking. To break the 160 wall, you'll need at least 5 MLB SSR units. So assuming you're close, I would ignore any lesser desired meta units for the chance to break the wall faster. And if you're not following the above 2 reasons, let's go over what are the best meta units to wishlist. So I'm going to split my priorities into 2 tiers. Either a unit is recommended to put on the wishlist pool, or a flex unit that you don't really need but can be used if you can't pick from anyone else. For Elysian, sadly, they really gotta step up their manufacturing game because they have the least amount of meta units to this day. My 2 recommended units are Prydwen and Helm. The other 3 slots you can pick whatever. I'm going by some of the wishlisting guides online, but I feel like a lot of the flex units are quite interchangeable. Moving on to Missilus, this faction is definitely more stacked. Some of the units are used quite a lot. For my recommended units, I would go for Leader, Senti, Maxwell, and Pepper. The last slot is flexible. So on online tier lists, units are often categorized into how good they are in the early/late game. I tend to focus on the latter as you will eventually go from the early game to late game, but you can't ever go back. So even if some of the listed units might not be so good now, they will get their time to shine eventually. Versus ones that might be good for newer players, but fall off later on. Okay, Tetra. The competition is quite fierce here. They got some of the most busted units in the game, so these 5 slots are gonna be tough choices. For the slots, I'm going with Alice, the Bunny Twins, and Noise. And I hesitantly leave the last slot as flexible, but I will put Dala or Novel here, just because their utility is really good in the late game. Now, I would normally not spend gems on the standard banner, as a lot of players will say it's easier to get multiple copies of the same character if they're actually on raid up. But obviously the game will give you summoning tickets from time to time, so feel free to spend them then. The only reason that I can think of where it's a good idea to spend gems on the standard banner is if you're extremely close to breaking the 160 wall, and getting the majority of any of the wishlisted units will help you achieve that. So a limited banner will typically feature a character for 2 to 3 weeks. The 4% SSR rate still applies here, but you have a 2% chance, or 50% of that 4% to get the rate up unit. If you lose the coin flip, you will get a random SSR from the standard pool instead. And unfortunately, you don't get to wishlist. Unlike in Genshin, there's no guarantee that you'll get the featured unit if you lose a certain amount of coin flips, so there will be times when you're just really unlucky. Now personally, 1 copy is good enough for me because the majority of Nikkes that go on raid up will be added to the standard pool after the banner ends, so you can still get copies of them then. Now every time you roll on the banner, you'll get a mileage ticket. If you get 200 of those, you can actually just buy the raid up unit from the shop. This is the game's pity system, but be very careful what you buy with these, as 200 pulls can take a while to accumulate. If you ask the majority of players, the only 2 types of units that are worth using mileage tickets for are limited units or pilgrims. Limited units are truly limited. They do not get added to the standard pool. You must wait for a rerun, or in the case of collab units, it's extremely unlikely they'll be available again after the banner ends. So snagging one with your guaranteed pity can be a good last resort to secure them. For pilgrims, 2 have been released post-launch, and they only had a drop rate of 1% instead of the usual 2. So every SSR only has a 25% chance to be the raid up unit. Generally speaking, the majority of pilgrim units are some of the most powerful in the game, and the last 2 were no exception. It's a good idea to have 200 gold tickets in reserve to secure them. But what about units that are yet to be released in the future? How can we plan ahead? So first, Shift Up is one of those companies that do anniversary characters like an FGO, and since it's a big celebration, the unit that gets introduced with it can be assumed to be quite strong, or at least widely desired by the majority of players. Maldonia from New Year and Dorothy from the 6-month anniversary are both top-tier units, and we can assume the same for the first anniversary coming up in November. In other cases, certain units can surprise everyone with how good they are, but only after players have gone around to figuring them out after their release. This means one of the most difficult things to do in this game when it comes to maximizing the gacha is to just simply wait. Don't drop your gems on a new banner right away. You wait a week, then the meta-analysis start to come in and give some information of how good they really are. I've been a victim of this in the past. I see a shiny new unit and I pull them, only to find out that they're not actually that strong. So I know how hard it is to hold the fort, but you just have to wait for a unit to be figured out, then decide whether or not to commit your gems. In the body label shop, make sure to buy the gold molds, as it should be the only thing you're getting in this shop. Yeah, you're gonna have to deal with the wonky RNG system, but you never know. A brand new SSR or a spare body might just be what you need to make progress. If at all you get the opportunity to purchase gems or summoning tickets that don't involve real money, I would recommend getting them before anything else in the shop. This could be the co-op shop for the weekly gems, or the event shop for the 20 tickets. One last thing, if you're still new to the game, there is an exclusive banner where you can get a guaranteed SSR if you spend 2,000 paid gems. If you don't plan on whaling, I would suggest just buying the 30-day supply pack for $5, as you get 330 paid gems per pack. So eventually you'll have enough to buy this. If you're wondering about the friend point gacha, you can still get SSRs, but only from the standard pool, and the chance is halved at 2%. I normally don't roll this except for completing the weekly mission to roll 20 times, as it does actually count for it. You also don't get to wishlist, but it can be a pleasant surprise sometimes when you get the occasional gold. Now that you understand the gacha mechanics, how does it tie into the 160 wall? This infamous progression barrier will require you to have 5 max limit broken SSR units in order to level your synchro device past level 160. This can be a tall order, but it can be mitigated with some planning. First, I know I didn't touch upon the mileage tickets you get from the standard banner. Once the game gives you enough materials to pull, you'll eventually accumulate 200 tickets to be able to purchase a spare body for a Nikke. A spare body is specifically an additional copy of a Nikke you already have. They're used to limit break them. If you buy the spare body of a unit but does not own a copy already, you still can't use that unit. The spare body basically becomes a useless item in your inventory until you pull them. At a certain point in the game, you'll begin to get some max limit broken SSR Nikkes, and saving those mileage tickets for the last couple of limit breaks you need is a very good idea. Now, I'm not sure if this is still in the game, but in the past update, the game actually gave you an item that lets you choose a free spare body from any standard unit in the game. If this item still exists, I would save it until you're one limit break away from having using 5 MLB SSRs, as it can become the key to breaking the 160 wall. The spare body shop will rotate every day, so be patient until a desired unit appears. The 160 wall is something all players will experience, and it's not really a matter of if you're going to break it, it's a matter of when. Everyone will get past it, it's just the difference of how fast you're able to. But don't worry, because even if you don't right away, you can still make some decent progress in the game, and even get overload gear in the late game. So don't be discouraged if it's taking a while. Your main goal before the wall is to beat the boss on chapter 16, because when you do, you unlock special interception, which is what you can start getting tier 9 gear, and you can use it to get overload gear. I have seen online that it is indeed possible to beat the boss before breaking the wall, and when you do, since special interception locks your units to level 200 anyways, the only deficiency you will be facing will be talent or gear levels. But even without overload gear, you can still beat some of the bosses quite consistently and still start kitting out your roster with overload gear. Okay, that's gonna be for my guide for the gacha and the 160 wall. I hope you found the information helpful. I'm a little hesitant to give advice on anything involving real money, but these are the tips that has worked for me in the past. And with them, you can plan for any desired Nikkes or make progress for the 160 wall faster. Next time, we will be taking a look at all of the special interception bosses and how to beat them, so you can finally start getting your first overload gear. Thank you for watching as always, and if you want to see more Nikke content just like this, you know what to do. And always remember, have fun with the game.